Okay, well, this is creative therapy, and that sigh pretty much sums up the entire podcast in a nutshell. No, this is actually a sigh of relief and a bit of unbelief that we're here. We are doing it, finally. After a couple years of this project, living in my head and in my notes, it's all come together. And I waited for as long as I did because, I honestly just didn't know how to package the whole thing, what the perspective or story that was authentic to me was going to be. And you might be like, well, how do you not know your own story? And well, I only know that now because of the years of unpacking and exploring and the ups and the downs and the lefts and the rights of experiences that it took for me to finally figure it out for myself. So, what is creative therapy, you might ask? Or maybe you didn't, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So, let's start with what it's not. Creative therapy is not a therapy session, at least not legally so. And I am in no way, shape, or form a therapist. I don't play one on TV. As much as I love to psychoanalyze things and watch true crime, reality is I am not. Although I am academically pursuing a degree in the field, and we can get more into that later, but reality is I am not an expert, and I don't claim to be. This is coming from the angle of creativity as therapy. Okay, this is about the expression of creativity as therapy because photography specifically and art in general has been a means of therapy for me. It's essential to my survival and my well-being. And when I mention creativity, though, I'm not just mentioning a specific type of art. Like, this is not defined as a focus on fine art or even just on visual art or performance art. I mean, it could be, and I'm sure future episodes will touch on those types of disciplines, but this is not what that podcast is. In whole, creativity to me is being able to express yourself in a way that speaks to the soul and really just creating the experiences, the types of experiences for yourself and for others that evoke some sort of comfort for the mind and the body and the soul. And that's totally subjective, right? I mean, that's up to the individual to decide, who has their own personal experiences that shape their own perspective. So whatever that might look like. I mean, for me, it's photography. For someone else, it's graphic design. For someone else, it could be jewelry making. It can be someone else's poetry, a film, a song, But it's not just talking about art in this sense of creating compositions. And I'll give you another example. So whenever I think about creativity, I think about this one day where my tia, who is my aunt for all of my non-Spanish speakers out there, and there was one day that she said out loud to a bit of the family who was sitting together in the same room. She was like, "Oh my God, you guys are all so creative, man. I don't have a creative bone in my body. I'm so jealous. You guys are all just so creative." And if you're listening, Thea, I'm sorry. I had to add a little drama to the story, okay, to make it a little more juicy. It's not how you sound like. But, she's not the first person who said that. And I've heard plenty of people say this before. But when she said this, I looked at her and I had this answer for her because I've known her personally my whole life. And I was just like, what are you talking about? You have such a way of bringing people together. And, she's such a people person and she's able to make connections with every person that she meets. She brings people together. She's an incredible host. She's hosted so many different kinds of events at her house and everyone always enjoys themselves, right? Because she is so good at doing that. And that within itself is being creative. It's a form of art. making connections, bringing people together, and creating experiences that are good for the mind, the body, and the soul. She does that so successfully. And so, creativity shows up in so many different ways. And it can be in creating art, it can be in the way that you put events together, it can be the way that you strategize for your business. So many different ways. And creativity has been a huge element of my life, but I've only come to really observe the positive effects of it in others more recently. So I took on work with adolescents who struggle with issues like depression and eating disorders and OCD and anxiety and such. And I've noticed that each one, well, they all have their individual list of coping skills that they might turn to when they're having a rough time. But what I noticed is that the majority of these adolescents, they tend to gravitate to a form of creativity. And it's so cool to see because I watch them and I get to watch them just be so laser focused on whatever this project is that they're working on. And I mean, it can be putting posters together. It can be putting a collage together. It could be painting. It could be just listening to music. It could be, what's some other cool things that I've watched them do? I mean, just watching the enjoyment that they get out of picking flowers, out of baking, out of going for a walk. That is so rewarding to watch, but it is also so interesting to me to study. And I say all that because this has become a study and kind of an obsession of mine to the point where I took my ass back to school, okay? I decided to study both psychology and art history simultaneously, yes, in the process of double majoring. And I know it sounds crazy, it sounds dumb, especially because I'm not going to age myself here, but let's just say I haven't just graduated from high school, okay? But I've decided to let go of others' opinions and timelines and critiques and expectations of what, a career path should be to finally just give myself a chance to go all in. And these are interests that I've had since I was a kid, and I've always struggled with going back and forth between the two, between psychology and the arts. I mean, throughout school, throughout my career, that's why I never settled on a degree before, because first it was journalism, then it was marketing, then it was graphic design, then psychology, then sociology. And the majority of my career for the last 15 years has been focused on marketing and branding, more along the lines of creating the visual components for that. But I don't know. I just don't know, because I've always combined the two and have tried to find the balance between the two. I just don't agree with the fact that these two fields should be kept separate. And I mean, well, I understand why they have been, right? There's specialized focuses that need these specific disciplines, but I feel like there should be a field of study that combines the two, because there's an obvious connection between art itself and the psychological responses we have to it, right? Even our physical responses, our visceral responses, our neurological responses. I mean, they go hand in hand. But for some reason, we keep these things separate for the most part. And actually, one of my recent findings was that there is a fairly new field of study that came out of the 60s called neuroaesthetics. And what neuroaesthetics is, it takes a look at how we understand and translate the power of the arts. It was pioneered by a neuroscientist by the name of Marion Diamond, who back in the 60s was able to prove that creating enriched environments does rewire our brains. And not only do I find that so fascinating, but it gives me hope about the future of these studies and how we can leverage them to better ourselves. So that's the therapy part of it. For me, it's just wellness. So creative therapy is finding your way to your wellness through whatever art form speaks to you. So this podcast is kind of just going to be me documenting my experiences of combining all of those things. But I am speaking from a perspective primarily as a photographer because that is my art form. It's what I do professionally. It's what I do pretty much every day, just on my own. I have been a freelance photographer. I've gone into business for myself, and I'm sure we'll touch on that later, on those aspects of running a creative business versus doing it as a hobby. And there will be talk about photography and photographers in addition to other forms of art and wellness. And I will be tapping on other guests from various industries to share their insights as well. But you are going to get some psychology and some philosophy just based on observation and reading and the experiences that I'm learning from right now. And I just hope that through that, I can just document this for other people to also become aware of their own wellness and their own creativity, to be able to explore from within and use creativity to solve problems, and just enjoying that and embracing that and being aware of that in the day-to-day without any pressures. Because, you know, especially with hustle culture being so prominent, we're being told that everything that we do has to be monetized. And I just don't think that that is fair to put on us. You know, naturally, we are creators. Whatever it is that you believe in, we are a creation. And I believe that we inherently have creativity within us. We have the power to create and transform. And so allowing the space and the use and using these different strategies and skills and talents, we can better ourselves, and we can help each other better themselves, and collectively we can all rise together, right? So yeah, that I guess just about sums it up. Creative therapy. And again, not a therapist, okay? I'm not even close, you guys. And if I happen to get a cease and desist letter, then, maybe I guess I'll have to change the name. I guess. But until that happens, this has been Creative Therapy. Enjoy the ride.